Hello everybody, welcome back. This is your tropical update for August 28th. We're currently watching severe tropical storm Idalia, which will become a hurricane later this afternoon into this evening as it moves from the western tip of Cuba up and into the Florida coast. If we take a look at this model here, this brings it in around the center of the Big Bend. Some models bring it further north, some further south. We'll talk more about that here in a bit. Also watching Hurricane Franklin, now Category 4 hurricane, located south of Bermuda. Bermuda is located over here, and it will be making its way towards Bermuda over the next few days. So again, a very healthy looking Hurricane Franklin, classic hurricane there, and Idalia getting its stuff together finally. It's generally we'll talk more about that here in a bit. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Here's Tropical Storm Idalia off the western tip of Cuba. Might make landfall, might not. We'll kind of see later today, and then it'll move up into the Big Bend area of Florida where we could see major hurricane impacts. Again, this is a significant event unfolding here for the Florida Panhandle and southeastern United States, and I'll get into the details here after we finish this last slide before the details. Here is Franklin's kind of tracks here, and here is Idalia's tracks, and you see Idalia and Franklin kind of overlap at about a 3-day difference or so, and also Bermuda's right there in the mix, located about right here. So Idalia, after it impacts the southeastern United States significantly, could also impact Bermuda, which will just have been impacted by Franklin. But for now, since most people are worried about the impacts to the United States, let's talk about Idalia. What's going on now? You see very cold cloud tops, which is good, and in some semblance of an eye may be forming, but it's really not expected to form until it's on the other side of Cuba. Cuba is located right here, where my cursor is going around in circles. So by the time Idalia gets up there, where I drew that X, it should have a more well-defined eye. And you see here the forecast from the Hurricane Center brings it to hurricane strength later today, and then major hurricane strength continues gradually strengthening until it makes landfall. And it will continue to strengthen until it makes landfall. Where exactly it makes landfall is up for debate. It could be as far south as somewhere like Spring Hill or as far north as somewhere like Apalachicola. Probably not that far north anymore. Probably somewhere else within the Big Bend area. And again, this is a significant event unfolding. Storm surge to 11 feet, major hurricane force winds likely, several tornadoes, a slight risk from the Storm Prediction Center, and 12 inches a foot of rain. You see the all of the alerts are highlighted, and so real quickly I want to go over those before we move in to the impact by impact. We'll do wind, surge, rain, and tornadoes all here shortly. In general, here a tropical storm watch is in effect for the Florida Keys west of 7 Mile Bridge. That's approximately right here on the map, as well as Sebastian Inlet, Florida, to Altama Sound, Georgia. So that's roughly this area of the Atlantic coast. Tropical storm warning in effect for the Dry Tortugas, the Isle of Youth, Tulum to Rio Largos on the Yucatan tip, as well as portions of Florida from Choclonsky, I think, to Longboat Key, Oklachoski to Indian Pass here on the main coast of Florida. And again, that on the Gulf Coast here, and there's watches and warnings all throughout that coastline that I just highlighted. Hurricane watch from Inglewood to Longboat Key, the Okeechobee River down to Indian Pass, as well as a hurricane warning in Pinar del Rio, Cuba. That's located here, as well as from Longboat Key to the Okeechobee and Florida. We're looking at storm surge watches in effect from Choclosky to Inglewood and from Okeechobee to Indian Pass on the Gulf side of Florida, as well as from Inglewood to the Okeechobee on the Gulf side of Florida being under a storm surge warning. That's the main portion of the Big Bend located here, where we're going to see significant storm surge up to 11 feet, maybe even more. There's also a storm surge watch from St. Mary's River, that is the Florida-Georgia line, up to the Altamaha Sound in Georgia. So again, many watches and warnings. Go to your National Weather Service forecast office for the latest information for your specific location. As you can see, all of the models show strengthening of Idalia until it makes landfall. And again, several of the models, including the Hurricane Center, bring this to Category 3 strength. You see several models also below that, but really there's some shear, but that's really the only thing that's going to stop this system. And again, you see a wide range of outcomes still of where this storm could move over the Florida Peninsula, and where exactly that happens could cause a wide range of scenarios, and I'll talk about that once we get to the surge graphic. Here, once again, the wind will be significant with Idalia. Again, we're going to see major hurricane force wind. Major hurricane force winds possible anywhere here in pink. Hurricane force winds possible anywhere here in red. Gale force winds in orange. Tropical storm force winds in yellow, as shown on that map here. Let's talk about the surge. Like I mentioned, the cone, generally this surge is based off of the center moving in around there. And that brings the highest surge probably on this side of the system. Let's say, for example, that the system moves in a little further to the south, say right here. Now this puts not only this area more in play, but also Tampa Bay, because it's a bay and very storm surge prone. That also gets in play. So it would actually significantly increase the amount of storm surge we see throughout the Florida Peninsula. It's also certainly possible we see it go further north, something like Tallahassee, where then the storm surge is where it's more or less outlined here. We'll see what happens. There's still a lot to be determined. Again, the models with a wide range of possibilities here at the moment. We're looking at 7 to 11 feet from the Anclote River down to, I can't read that on my screen, Cheskastowiska. I tried to say that yesterday, still don't have it. 6 to 9 feet from that same city down to the Anclote River. And then we're also looking at 4 to 7. Here, I'm going to fix this, that way I can read it. 4 to 7 feet from the Anclote down the middle of Longboat Key, as well as Tampa Bay. And then also 4 to 7 from the Ancilla River over to the Ocklawahannock. And then, of course, 2 to 4 feet from Indian Pass all the way down to Chokoloskee, as well as from the mouth of St. Mary's to the Altamaha Sound in the state of Georgia. Rain is also a concern. Remember, storm surge and rain, the two biggest things. Water is the biggest killer with tropical cyclones. Significant rain possible everywhere, basically from Fort Myers northward to Tallahassee within the state of Florida. Probably also Orlando, Jacksonville. We're looking at Savannah, maybe even Augusta, Charleston, Wilmington, Cape Hatteras, the whole 9 yards. We're watching the entirety of the Atlantic coast up to probably around Duck, North Carolina is what we're looking at right now. You see major flooding rain likely for the areas in red here, moderate flooding rain in orange, and again, significant impacts possible from that as well. The Storm Prediction Center saying a 5% chance of tornadoes. This is tomorrow. That is Tuesday, and this is Wednesday, where the risk then shifts to be more South Carolina, Georgia-based, perhaps even North Carolina as well. And by the time we get to Thursday, we could see some impacts further north in North Carolina, South Carolina areas. Expect that slight risk to move kind of where this marginal is right here. Again, remember, with tropical cyclones, a 5% risk of tornadoes is sufficient for a slight risk. That's not the norm, but that is the case when it comes to tropical cyclones. That's enough on Idalia. Again, continue to stay tuned. We'll have updates, and of course, the Hurricane Center has updates every 3 hours with full updates every 6 hours. A very healthy tropical, or Hurricane Franklin, definitely not a tropical storm. With this satellite presentation, we're at winds of 145 miles an hour, pressure down to 937. Winds up to 70 miles an hour possible in Bermuda. Bermuda located here. About a 50-50 chance that they get any tropical storm force winds. But if the storm is a little bit closer, this is this whole thing. You know, in the grand scheme of things, 20 miles isn't a big difference. But when you're making landfall in Florida, it's a big difference. When you're nearing Bermuda, it's also a big difference, where tropical storm watch is now in effect. Outside chance that the system does reach Category 5 strength here within the next 12 hours or so before it begins to weaken as it moves off to the north and off to the races, becoming extratropical here in about 4 or 5 days from now. We're also watching that continued area of interest off the coast of Africa near the Cabo Verde Islands, 50% chance formation within the next 7 days. No major threat to land. And of course, we have Idalia to worry about. So I won't make any further comments on that. It's a long enough video as it is. That's all for now. Chris Dixon, InfoWeather Media.